Um, okay, let's move on to our next talk. We have Alex Chung with us. He has worked in various product management roles at Amazon Web Services, machine learning, Facebook computer vision, Lyft account security, and several startups. While at Facebook, he expanded the company's socially responsible computer vision data labeling program. In addition to his day job, his passion for serving led him to build Cocatalyst.org, a nonprofit stock donation platform used by churches in the Silicon Valley and hundreds of charities nationwide. While he's deciding his next career move, he currently runs a machine learning standards and open source software nonprofit. Alex, take it away. Alex, I don't think there's some with your mic.
Can you hear me now?
Yep, you're good.
Thank you, Nick, and thank you for everyone who's attending and the organizers for really giving us a platform where we can share about the causes and issues that we care a lot about, and really give us a platform to share these ideas forward. And in my talk, I'm going to discuss this concept of social impact using your heart and your mind. And within this, the intended audience for this session are really folks with a specific background. And the way I think of this is it's the white collar individual who is working in Silicon Valley or working in New York that has gone to a good school. And people might anecdotally call them working at a great company in Silicon Valley. I think the tech companies, Facebook, Google, et cetera, being the ones that are popular in late. And then other individuals that might specialize in a high-paying field. So whether that be something like machine learning or life sciences and bioinformatics, it's a very specialized field. And if you work in this, any one of those different categories, I'm appealing to you to consider, if you are looking to give back, look beyond finding immediate causes that might be positive feeling, and go for ones that also you can apply some of your core skills. And the way that I look at this from a top-down view is many of the people who fall within any one of these three categories work in a field with large reach. If we look at software, if you build an application, if you work on a tech company like Facebook or Instagram, it immediately has a large user base. In the finance world, if I look at some of my friends who are in investment banking, the transactions and deals that they're involved in literally change the economy in terms of what's possible, and that impacts the world arena. Consulting services, making companies more efficient and more effective, healthcare, saving lives. Across all of these fields, the reach of an individual, even if you're a part of a larger organization, just in terms of a numbers perspective, is quite high. But when many of these individuals that I know that are in these fields are looking at their volunteering, looking at the ways that they give back, it's often a check, or it's through local communities that they're involved in. And the way that I kind of break this down in terms of this viewpoint is, if you're serving in the local community, I think for the individuals that I've become very close to who have this orient towards social impact, I think they view the world of how the different systems in society have impact is that the governments and nonprofits are a large section. Corporations have some degree of ESG, environmental social governance, and corporate social responsibility. But then volunteers, do-gooders, from the individuals who are working at a company, but maybe spend a portion of their time, their volunteering activities can also add a tremendous amount of value. And I'd like to challenge that thesis by saying the way that many of us look at volunteering today isn't enough, especially if you have many different skill set that are common in those with highly educated, specialized fields or working at these great companies. What I'd argue is volunteering actually has a far more minimal impact relative to folks who dedicate all of their time on impacting society through either government work or nonprofits. It's more comparable to what corporations do in terms of their afterthought, their ESG practice that is involved with sustainability or local community involvement. And just to make that in another perspective, the common volunteering activities I see are packing gifts, food drives, soup kitchens, teaching English in a country for several weeks, children and being able to tutor in your local school and homeless shelter. While they add tremendous value, just purely by a reach perspective, it's not nearly as high compared to many people's day jobs that are involved with these activities. And the question that I try to remind people is, how do you move up? Because if you have these skills that can impact in a very large manner for your day job, the natural conclusion that one can have is there's an opportunity to find those avenues, those opportunities in your volunteer work, in your side projects, in what you might consider your giving back time. And this, in my observation, has really been a thought process of, are you interested in serving your local community where you can have immediate impact? And not just that, you can feel good about it. Oftentimes you can interact with the people that are directly receiving the service when you go to a foreign country and meet with those in a missionary program that are benefiting that local community. Or if you're at a homeless shelter, you directly get to interact with these. And it can be very, very rewarding. And I think that becomes a priority oftentimes over serving in a manner where there is long-term measurable and sustainable quality of life differences. And looking at metrics like the amount of support that's going to low-income individuals, refugee placements, and economic sustainability for homeless individuals. These more traditional metric-driven approaches are an element that I think individuals should look more into as they think about social impact, as they look at volunteering, and as they look about their work in philanthropy. And what I've seen in my own life, and also in those around me who have spent a lot of time thinking about social impact, is we've kind of carved out 3 channels that we think will grow in popularity over this coming decade. And I want to summarize it into 3 buckets. First, it's looking to change a status quo in your industry. So you work in a specific vertical or company, and within the practices, you look to make a shift that is more responsible, that is more stakeholder aware. Second, another opportunity that we're identifying is that individuals can apply their skills in a completely different context to their day job, but look for avenues where those skills can directly change a community, a subgroup, or a program that has direct impact on lives. And this is outside of the day job. In other words, it's the classic side projects or side hustles, but really looking at it from a social impact perspective. And then the third trend that we're seeing is, especially within the millennials and Gen Z, looking to work at companies for a full-time job that have a social impact focus, whether it be a byproduct of what the company's mission is in terms of the services or goods that they sell, or working at companies whose cultures have a focus on the community, on doing good, on nonprofits and charities as a natural extension of their core business. So I'm going to talk about the first one, changing a status quo in your industry. And for background, I worked at Facebook, and specifically a program called Data Operations. And this was in this whole world of computer vision. When you use the Instagram camera effects and filters, and you get the dog face ears, or you get those weird camera effects that make you look like a man if you're a woman, and vice versa, that's actually powered by computer vision models. These computer vision models are algorithms, this whole field of AI. And within AI, there is a whole value chain. It's a whole industry of bespoke services that are involved. You have researchers that are building these models, and then you have data teams that actually are procuring the volumes and the data sets and the information that is used by these researchers to train these models. And at the time when I joined Facebook, I actually felt pretty lost. This was a career move that I wasn't expecting. And when I joined, I was placed into this program that I realized gave me a whole platform. What started just being project management work, securing large hundreds of thousands, if not millions of images per month of labeled data for these researchers, turned into an opportunity where I could look at the entire tool chain and look for optimizations that I thought made sense. So from the software perspective, I look for new ways that we could build tools to streamline researchers' development. But also when it came to this data procurement process, I was able to look at the performance factors while also looking at how we can use this as a platform for impact. And what it came down to was the status quo for procuring this data was that we'd hired individuals through large vendors. These are Fortune 500 contracting companies, publicly traded oftentimes. And then they hired large workforces that essentially did something like this. Individuals would look at a computer screen and basically play around with a Photoshop-like experience and create these data sets for our researchers. And rather than continuing to use these large for-profit institutions for our large workforces, I thought about that value chain and came from the perspective of what are the different elements of social impact that we could see from other industries and apply this within our field of machine learning data. And what I found was there were opportunities to do the outsourcing to actually nonprofit organizations and for-profit, but socially responsible startups and organizations that actually focused on what many would call a double bottom line. You do a specific service for a business, but at the same time, you're cognizant of the stakeholders. And I really consider this serving 2.0 because while I still had my day job, I also was able to make a direct change that had an impact on the lives of many at the very bottom of the pyramid. These nonprofits and these socially responsible startups actually hired from these slums of local communities. When I visited some of these operations in Nairobi, Kenya, I literally visited the slums of Kibera, which is a part of the city of Nairobi where you literally could not drive through with a car because it's covered in trash in these tents and in these shacks where these individuals lived. And through certain partners that we had fostered relationships at Facebook, I was able to hire within my vertical's computer vision program, 1,100 individuals. And then we later replicated that program to also hire refugees from displaced Middle Eastern countries, a topic that's of very high relevance today, that have moved to Southeast Asia. And we were to give them jobs that they otherwise would not have. They literally would be living on the streets. Having a platform within a company gives you unique avenues to take that platform and use it for good. But it oftentimes takes creative thinking and really a commitment to looking for these new opportunities to really drive in terms of accepting the ideas and then execute on those changes. And I will now move to part 2, which is what I think is also becoming very trendy of late. And it's this idea of social impact in a different context. These are really the after hours. In Silicon Valley, many people that I know work 40 to 50 hours. I'm sure some would say there would be even more, but generally speaking, there are many excess hours in the week that people have. And with this time, people can go do normal day activities, fun day trips, but they can also look at opportunities to apply their skills in an area that they're passionate in. In other words, giving back using their time. But once again, the idea here is to be more creative and to look for avenues where they can use their core skills with the hope that the impact has much higher sizable value for the community rather than a traditional volunteering program. And I look at nonprofits like Y-Corps, who have been a really great testament to this model. Y-Corps is a nonprofit here in the San Francisco Bay Area that takes typically individuals out of college to mid 30s, and they're normally folks that come from a very similar background to what I described, working tech, consulting, or other white collar jobs. And they're placed with these nonprofits to create a program or optimize a process so that these charities can grow in their capabilities. And I'm going to dive into a similar type of initiative that I did that isn't through Y-Corps, but something that I did personally. And this is through a product that I had started called Cocatalyst. And it's this whole idea of when you give to charities, for those that are listening, and you either give to a church, you give money to a nonprofit organization, it's actually significantly better to give with your stock, in other words, your investments, rather than cash. And it has to do with these tax laws that make it better to give with appreciated stock like Apple, Amazon, Google stock to a charity rather than just normal hard-earned cash or using a credit card payment. And what I had done here was I had identified various niches where I thought technology hasn't really proliferated into these spaces where people can actually do more good with relatively negligible more amount of effort, as long as we made this process easier. And my background comes from both software engineering and also a very business-oriented framework. And I had created Cocatalyst, which was essentially a nonprofit organization powered by tech that helped charities, including many San Francisco Bay Area churches, receive stocks from their donors with almost as simple of an experience as a donor giving with their credit card. I consider this another form of serving 2.0 because I use my abilities to write code, to develop business processes, to create a product after hours. This is on top of a fairly grueling job at AWS, Facebook, and other companies, to form a program that ultimately, right before our acquisition, so this was about June of this year, I looked at our numbers, we were processing about $4 million worth of stock per year. And we essentially helped donors give more to their charities at a lower out-of-pocket cost. And what that meant is the charities could access more resources with minimal additional amount of effort. And this is a really impactful way to foster a direct relationship with charitable organizations in the areas that we served, while also applying skills that otherwise would not be used if I had done just a traditional volunteering approach. But there's pros and cons to applying your skills in a different context. And some of the ones that come to mind are it's a very large time commitment. You will have to be entrepreneurial in that effort and be willing to stick through it for an extended period of time. And that's why I also encourage people to explore moving to companies that can become their day jobs that have impactful products and culture. And this is probably something that I've seen the least, but I think will become more popular over time, especially as the topic of ESG becomes more relevant in society today. And this idea of moving to companies with more impactful products and culture means the company's mission statement aligns with your core values. And that actually takes a good amount of reflection in terms of identifying what those are and really having conviction that those values are what matter to you. And it also takes a reasonable amount of research to really identify the companies who are building products that have both short-term and long-term impacts on the areas that you are passionate about. And these type of environments are places where you really can excel because you wake up excited every day going to work, knowing that users or communities that are interacting with your organization or your product can directly benefit. But there are potential downsides like a pay cut or moving out of the popular city centers like San Francisco Bay Area. Not all of these companies are able to be located in expensive locations like New York, LA, et cetera. But these companies are popping up all over. And there's so many unique examples now of companies that I would say have a traditional for-profit mission, but have also, by virtue of what they do or the culture that they fostered, have investments in local communities and also fostering multiple stakeholder returns. If I look at a company that has really nothing to do with charity philanthropic work, Salesforce, that develops CRM software and other software as a service applications for enterprises, they've really created a culture where employees are able to allocate portions of their time to volunteer. They're rewarded for that. In fact, Salesforce gives away a lot of its products and have large divisions within their organization just dedicated for helping nonprofits and charities benefit from either their software or their employees' talent. Twilio and other organizations are also following in line on allocating sums of money to give to local communities, but also rewarding their employees for fostering that creativity to give back. But in many of the other examples I'm showing here, from healthcare innovation to financial services to helping micro entrepreneurs in emerging market countries, these are for-profit startups and companies, in some cases publicly traded, that have a product that actually align to the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, if you really break it down. For example, in Southeast Asia, Gojek and Grab have an e-wallet service that are giving financial services to a whole generation of young and middle-aged individuals who have smartphones that have never otherwise had a bank account. And similarly for Tala and Branch, they're giving loans to individuals and entrepreneurs in emerging market and frontier market countries like Kenya, Mexico, Brazil, India, that otherwise would only have access to very high interest rate loan sharks. The roles at these type of companies are the traditional software engineering, product management, marketing, operations, finance roles that many individuals who work in Silicon Valley, live in New York, would otherwise possess, but you can apply those skills to a product, a service that ultimately can drive long-term good for the local and larger community. Ultimately, what I encourage audience members and attendees is to consider, is there an opportunity to have impact using your skills? If you're in the Bay Area, chances are you have a great education. You work at a very considerable company. What else can you do with those skills if you have a desire to have change in society? Waking up every day and writing code may be fulfilling for many, but it's that type of role alone is not fulfilling in totality for all. If you have a desire for more, look at what you can uncover in terms of new opportunities, whether that be changing a status quo in your current workplace and industry, or taking it to another level and applying this in another context and working with either nonprofits or even looking to create a new program of your own with friends or with other industry leaders. And then finally, also consider the idea of moving to another company. It may or may not be a pay cut, but you wake up excited knowing that the result of what you do every day, those 40 to 50 hours a week, can change lives. Thank you for listening to my session. I hope that you consider social impact using your heart and your mind. My email is alex@awchung.com in case anyone wants to reach out. Thank you so much for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed the remainder of the sessions on today's Passion Talks.
Thank you, Alex. What a great talk. I love the lens that you're looking at your work as. A lot of people, I think that the failure is that they look and limit the extent of the impact that they can bring with their work. When you're taking and impacting Facebook and saying, hey, look, here's this other workforce that we can use, it's a win-win for everybody. I think that's amazing. And I'd love to talk more about it in our Q&A at the end. Awesome talk. Thank you. Okay.